Hello, welcome back to Java for Beginners. In the last video, we talked about looping, and in this one, let's just get rid of it. In this one, we're going to be talking about functions in the Java language. Right, so I have a simple function here that I'm going to be pasting. Notice that we've discussed before that main is a function. We didn't go into detail of what a function is, but we said main is a function. So I pasted a function here called calculate area. And the purpose of that function is, it's like a black box really, that you give it input and you receive output from it. In this case, the inputs that we give it is the length and the width of a rectangle. So I can rename it to calculate rectangle area. And what it's going to do for me is it's going to take the length and the width and multiply them by each other. And then it's going to return that back to the caller of the function. So the way to use a function is to call it, is to invoke it. So let's invoke it. We have public static int. For now, the part that I want you to pay attention to is the int, which is integer. So what we're communicating when we put int here is we're saying the return type, the value that is being returned is of type integer. So when I'm invoking that function, I'm expecting an integer to be returned, which makes sense because the area is integer. So what I can say here is I've int length equals, let's say 5, and int width equals 10. That makes no sense. Never mind me. This is not scripted. Length is 10, width is 5. And I'm going to invoke and see how IntelliJ would, so if you're using IntelliJ, it would autocomplete for you, so I don't have to type the whole thing. It recognizes that there is a function that I can invoke that is called calculate rect area. So I just hit enter. And it's given me here a dialog thing that is saying, right, this function is expecting two values or two parameters. The first one is the length. The second one is the width. So length is, I can pass the variable here length to it, length, and it's auto-completing based on the names and what is the function expecting. It's auto-completing, like I just have to tap tab and it would auto-complete it for me. So basically what we're doing here is we're saying calculate the rectangle area of length 10 and width 5. So once we invoke that, we're expected to receive a value. That value, we can store it in an integer, and we're going to call it area. And that value is the length multiplied by the width, and it's going to be returned and stored in area. So then I can print out the area. And maybe I can say area is, hit enter. And I got my answer, which is 5 multiplied by 10. All right, so you may ask, why would you want to use functions? Like, why can't I just do this? Get rid of this and get rid of this. And I'll still get my answer, which is area is 50. Like, why bother? Right. So functions are ways of basically reusing functionality. So instead of having to, let's say I have 10 rectangles that I want to calculate the area for. And let's say that the calculation of area is more than just one line. Like you could have as many lines here as you want. Do you have to repeat all those lines for every rectangle? Or do you, like, I'll give you an example. Scanner system N, scanner, next int, maybe scanner dot L, next int. So I want to write a function that would prompt the user to input the length and the width of a rectangle and then compute that. So compute the area. So I'm going to say int length equals, and I'm going to repeat that. And since we're taking that input from the user, I can just get rid of the parameters on the method here so that I don't have to send them, because the function is going to request the user to input them. Right. And instead of return, I can make it of type void so that it doesn't return anything. Okay. You can say sout width is width, sout length is length, and sout area So what am I doing here? So these lines essentially allow you to grab the input from the user. So that will define a scanner to scan the standard input stream, and it'll allow you to basically ask users to input integers and then store those integers into integer-based memory locations, or integers, basically. So I'm going to ask for the length, the width, and then I'm going to print the width, the length, and I'm going to print the area. So I'll call that function here. And notice we went from a function before that was one line to a function that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. So I'll say calculate area and run my application. Oh, it would be nice to say something like input length. And I'm going to paste it here and say input width so that you know what's happening. You're prompted. So input length, let's say 5, input width 10, and then you get width is 10, length is 5, area is 50. I'm just going to swap these. Right. So we can repeat that function as many times as we want. So 5, 10, 50, 5, 7, 35, 7, 2, 14, etc. So instead of having, so as I was saying, instead of having to basically go copy this and then repeat it in your code as many times as you need, you can just simply repeat the invocation for that function. Like if we're just doing this, we can have a for loop. So int I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, and then I can just repeat that function 10 times, or as many times as you need. So I'll quit out of that, I'll run it again, 10, 2, 10, 5, etc. So you get the point. So that is a brief introduction to how functions work. They are a way of you to reuse and encapsulate functionality, this being the functionality, without having to basically know, like, I don't need to know what's happening here. If you have a good description for your file, like this description is probably out of date. So maybe I could say something like, grab user input, and calculate rect area. It's not the best name, but you get the point. So if I don't know what's going on here, I can just look at this and be like, grab user input and calculate, grab user input for length, or prompt user for length and width, and calculate rect area. So if you don't know what's going on here, you can confidently call this function and know what's going to happen without having to know what's going on here. And that is really the point, is to encapsulate functionality, and B, to reuse functionality so easily without having to repeat yourself everywhere you need that functionality in the code. So this has been a brief introduction to functions. In the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about parameters, return types, and just go over more examples of how functions can be useful in the Java language. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the